I'm going to talk about transactional distance. The agenda will talk about transactional distance, but first, because our environment is project-based, we'll define what is project-based learning and about collaborative learning. Then we'll explain what is transactional distance and straight go to our research. I'll describe two of our studies and then we'll make a small discussion, conclusion, and maybe we can analyze few, I don't know, joint research activity based on different assessments. Okay. What is project-based learning? Some of you know. First, it's student-centered teaching method correlated by scientific investigation, collaboration between those who had to work together, inquiry process, characterized by depth understanding of students, the broader knowledge base they build, construct in their mind, creativity. You can put the list here, and this is the most the most buzzword now in teaching science, the most buzzword in teaching engineering for the last 10 years, something like that. That's for the people who are not familiar with project-based. Collaborative learning or collaborative working, it's a process in which the partners take knowledge and their understanding through an explanation process. We have to communicate ideas, we have to communicate knowledge between the peers, between the partners. The collaborative learning process, we stand in front of a small problem. It's difficult to measure the collaborative learning since it depends on the environment you use. There are many research that try to measure the collaborative process, the quality of the collaborative process, but in all of them, or in all of what we found, the tools for thing are very particular for the study. So I listed here two examples of assessing tool, or assessing ways for collaborative learning, for the quality of the collaborative learning. In one research, they try to measure the learning perception, the length of the report, things like that. In another study, they observe the pattern of using the software and the hardware and try to evaluate the collaborative learning through those patterns, but it really depends on your environment. What we try to do is to measure the collaborative quality by measuring the transactional distance. This is the key variable we use. And now I'll try to explain what is transactional distance. So what is transactional distance? First is transaction. What is a transaction? Transaction is a set of interaction. Interaction is a simple relationship of action and reaction. Transaction is a set of those interactions, and we use action in everyday life all the time. When we want to withdraw money, this is the example you see in the slide. When we want to withdraw cash money, we are making a transaction, withdraw cash money transaction, which means that the ATM machine asks us something and we answer, and then it asks another thing and then we answer. And if the machine understands what we answer, and if we transmit the correct data to us, we will get our money in the end. And all of the action-reaction activities together are just one transaction. And this way, using transaction every day, when I want to explain something, I start to explain, I measure what you think, you ask me something, I answer. There is a point that I know that you understand what I mean. So we finished our transaction. Go on. I hope that we finish our transaction. It's quite difficult to communicate with you now because of our environment. So transactional distance first this is a theory, very famous theory in distance education. And it's conceptually important since it focuses on the pedagogical distance and not on the spatial or time distance, as most of people think is important in distance education, but it's not just distance education. It's even in a regular classroom or in front of people when you try to explain something. When you all go to a classroom and stand in front of your class, your students, and you something, and in the end you go out and you said, wow, it was really good. I hope they understand me. We cooperate. And sometimes same students, same class, same hour, just next week, something didn't work. This is the really meaning of this transactional distance, of this pedagogical distance. When we use the sentence, you don't understand me or you're not following me, we're really focusing on the transactional distance. It's a distance experience between the people that involve. It's subjective, personal, specific for each one. And one of the transactional distance characteristics is that it's an outcome of the process, of the teaching, learning, explaining activity. All the participants are part of the process, and in the end of the process, this is one of the outcomes of the results. So the main goal of our research was to develop and validate a tool, a measuring tool, an assessing tool that will assess the transactional distance per sections among peer students. So we developed one such a questionnaire and validated within two studies. The first is the mini project-based course, and the second is the large-scale project-based course. And now we will talk about those two studies. So the mini project-based course was a mini project in industrial engineering in Technion. The students have to model system, visualization-based environment, and the project the students work on was part of Visionair project. As you can see on the slide, there were 17 students participating in this course, and the course aimed to expose those students to a real international research project. They had to construct jointly a conceptual model with the OPM methodology, and they modeled Visionair projects. As you can see in the slide, we have the groups of students down the slide who collaborate with distant researchers. We have two types of collaboration between the peers and with the distant researchers. So what we use for this collaboration, for this research, first the students' peer collaboration, the students between themselves use emails, Skype conference, calls, SMS, chat rooms, and the OPM, the OPCAT tool, which helps them to model OPM models. And the other kind of collaboration, the student researchers collaboration, use emails, Skype video conference, and the OPM models. Important things to mention is that the collaboration between the peers was flexible. They send emails to each other, they send SMSs, they talk to each other. and the collaboration between the students to the researchers, to the Europe researchers, was quite rigid because they have to schedule a meeting. There were 3 or 4 meetings, and they talked to the distant researchers. They were together. Not every time they want to ask something, they just ask it. It was really much more rigid than the collaboration between themselves, and they use the OPM, which enables representing the system simply. I hope that you are all familiar with the OPM method, the object process methodology, which express ideas graphically and in natural language. Express ideas, express systems, as I hope you are all familiar with. So we have the transactional distance questionnaire, which we developed as part of this study. We asked the student to write project summary, reflection report, and we made semi-structured interviews with those students. The transactional distance questionnaire was constructed of 3 factors which reflected from the transactional distance definition. It was the communication factor, the understanding factor, and the satisfaction factor. The communication factor deals with the availability of communication resource. The understanding factor means the ability to explain and to know whether the other understands me. And the satisfaction is satisfaction for the collaboration from my peers, from the environment, from the course as a whole. This is the 3 factors of this questionnaire. And we measure those 3 factors in 2 situations. First, between the peers, it calls peers transactional distance, and between the peers to the distance researchers, and it called distance transactional distance. So the blue titles, DRTD, is the distant transactional distance, and PRTD, the green one, is the peer transactional distance. As you can see, the internal consistency alpha Cronbach was very high for those 17 students. For the PRTD, for the peers transactional distance, and for the distant researchers transactional distance. We collect the data at the end of the course by a web-based questionnaire, semi-structured interviews. We used mixed method analysis. And for testing the validation of this questionnaire, we asked 3 simple questions. First, we wanted to see if there are significant differences between the transactional distance resulting from the peer collaboration to the transactional distance resulting from the collaboration with the distant researchers, since the collaboration between the peers was flexible and the collaboration with the distant researchers was much more rigid. We hypothesized that there will be such a difference. Although there are differences, we hypothesize that there will be correlation between them because it's subjective and personal distance, and if you have distance in the group, I suppose we suppose that you feel distance from the distant researchers, and if you feel you understand much more with your peers, it will be easier to understand the distance researchers. So we hypothesize that there will be correlation between those 2 kind of transactional distance. And we have and the third hypothesis, third questions deals with the correlation with other outcomes, other students' outcomes. So as you can see, first research questions deals with differences between the transactional distance between the peers to the transactional distance to the distant researchers, and you can see that we did find significant differences between those 2 types of transactional distance as we hypothesized, which gives us, indicate an evidence of content validity as we hypothesize the rigid one to the flexible one. we did hypothesize that there will be differences between them. Second research hypothesis deals with correlation between those two types of transactional distance. But first you can see that there is an intercorrelation in each one. You can see that the correlation between the factors to themselves for student peers are really significant, and the correlation between the factors between the distant transactional distance. We have another evidence of internal structure validity. And while we look for correlation between those two types of transactional distance, we did find significant correlation between them both, which indicate more evidence of content validity, because we did expect that there will be correlation between these both. As you can see on the 0.43 the correlation between the communication with the distant researchers to the understanding of the peers, there is no correlation between them, and we didn't expect it to be, because if I understand my peers, it do not connect to the communication with the distant researchers, and we see that that it works as we expected it to work. But in other aspects, the work correlation where it has to be connected. For the third research questions, we used quality analyzing first. We took the personal project summary of each student and we analyzed it respect to four ideas. First, we look for content understanding, we look for process understanding, methodology understanding, and report quality. Each criterion was rated between 0 to 3. This was the analyzing of the first outcome of students. Another grade we gave for students for the number of learned skills. We analyzed the reflection report and the interviews we did, and we count the number of skills they mentioned in those outputs. We look for learning of new language, modeling tool, for practicing dynamic and autodidactic learning, for understanding the nature of industrial engineer role, and global project conducting, teamwork. Anything they mentioned, we count. And now we test the correlation between our measure, the peers transactional distance and the distant transactional distance and the total. We test the correlation between this outcome to other outcomes, to the student's project summary grade and to the number of learned skill they mentioned. And as you can see, we found a significant correlation between those different types of output. So as you can see, we have more evidence of content validity. Well, we're in the end of the first study in which we validate the questionnaire in a mini project course with just 17 students. We had content validity and internal structure validity, but it's not enough. It's just the beginning. Just after developing the tool, so we had to test the validation in another study, and that's really what we did. So now we try to measure the transactional distance in a large-scale project-based course. And this course and this study focused in validating the transactional distance questionnaire we developed previously as a collaborative quality assessment in a large scale. In this course, we had about 130 students who learned a specification and analysis information system course in our university. Half were female students, were assigned into 23 groups. 130 students were assigned to 23 groups. Each group was constructed of 2 teams. The project they had to construct, they had to reverse engineering well-known web-based systems such as Gmail, Expedia, eBay. There's 23 sites like this. We asked them to reverse engineer those sites. And then they were required to model those systems using two conceptual modeling languages, UML and OPM. In the course, they learned to use UML and OPM. In their projects, they have to practice those languages. Each group modeled one system. Each team modeled the same system with different language. So in one group that modeled Expedia, we had the UML team and we had the OPM team. In the middle of the semester, the OPM team continue to model the UML model, and the UML team continue to model the OPM model. So they cross over their model. Each student can or had to use UML and OPM to practice them both. We used many tools for this research, the transactional distance questionnaire, which was, they fill it in the end of the semester, and I will describe the quantitative analysis of this questionnaire. Same questionnaire as before. The students had to fill it just once, just for the peer collaboration. We don't have the distant researcher collaboration, of course. And as you can see, we we did explanatory factor analysis that really indicate three distant factors, content words, and the total explained variance was about 60. Each factor explained something and were meaningful. The reliability, the internal, the alpha Cronbach consistent coefficient was really good for each factor and for them for the whole questionnaire. As you can see, it's 0.84, and we ask 3 questions for testing the continue testing the validation of this questionnaire. First, we look for a significant correlation between the TD perceptions of students to the willingness of those students to work again with the same team members, since transactional distance is one of the outputs of the process of learning, of working together, and since you depend on your team, we wanted to see if there is a correlation between the transactional distance perceptions to the willingness to work with the same team again. We asked the students to evaluate the team grade they will get. They didn't know their grade. We asked them to evaluate what will be their grade, and we want to see if there are differences between those who evaluate high grade to those who evaluate low grade, if there are differences in transactional distance perceptions between them. And the third research hypothesis questions want to test if there are differences by gender, to check that there are no bias by gender. As you can see, we did find correlation, significant correlation between the willingness to work with the group, with the same team again, and to all the factors of transactional distance, which gives us small evidence of validity by content validity by criterion. I said small evidence because they are not the same. Measuring the distance, the understanding distance is not similar to want to work with the same people, but it's something. They can reflect, those measures are reflecting each other. And we did find significant differences between teams, between students who evaluate the grade lower than 90 and students who evaluate the team grade higher than 90. We find significant differences between this, which gives us another evidence for validity by a group comparison. As you can see, there are no differences in transactional distance between male and female, which means evidence for absence of bias by gender, which means we can use this tool as a tool for assessing the quality of collaboration learning, of collaborative working between peers. And as I hope you see, we validate the transactional distance questionnaire in the large-scale project-based course too. We had content validity and internal structure validity by several measurements. You can see that transactional distance is one of the outcome of knowledge transferring process, and it can be used for assessing, for comparing, and even for improving this process of transferring knowledge through diverse of visualization-based environment. And we think transactional distance can serve as a basis for comparing, improving, assessing knowledge transfer process, even with those processes which take place under the Visionair umbrella. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we think that maybe in addition to what we are doing and measuring the Visionair project, maybe we can start a joint activity, joint research activity with other labs that want to measure their environment, their collaborative environment. Maybe we can taste our questionnaires and maybe we can investigate something together.
I would like to ask you a question about the fundamentals of your analysis, which is about the way you evaluate collaboration and assessment of this collaboration, which is mainly due by the perception of the actors, directly by the perception, since they fill a questionnaire, if I well understood, and then you just make statistics on the direct perceptions. But did you also try to make some direct observation, external observations, to evaluate the results of students?
We did make observations, and we did make interviews, and we asked them to answer open questions. I just mentioned the quantitative parts of the validation in this presentation, but we did try to observe the collaboration work of those students.
If we would like to use this kind of collaboration assessment for example, transnational access projects, in order to assess transnational access projects, the question is to know if a questionnaire is enough for that, or if we need and can, because it's not so obvious, be able to put some sensors on the process in order to have an objective analysis and not only the perceptions by the hand of a project.
Yes. I talked about it in the beginning. I talk about other studies in which they used specific tools, specific sensors, specific measurements that were really tailored, environment tailored for assessing those environments. And we can still use other tools. The important with or the special with this tool that is generic. It's not dependent on the environment. It depends on the people that use the environment. And that's it. You don't have just to use this assessment. You can use, in addition, other sensors and things. And if we can do it, it will be another validation for this tool, another testing for this tool.